Put it together for lecturer and broadcaster, podcaster John Rothmann. John, you're a student of American and presidential history. Just because it was mentioned by one of our viewers and listeners, tax the rich, you can remember maybe more clearly than I, the top tax brackets in this country in the 60s were roughly what?
It depended on your level of income.
No, the top ones,
the very wealthy, about
richest.
90%.
What? Say it again.
90%.
Yeah. So that's my point. 90%. I mean, this is where we come from, and now we're scraping just to keep any kind of reasonable taxation on these wealthiest Americans.
Yeah. Can I just add? You looked for a term. I was listening, but I didn't think you said it. A disgusting abomination.
Right.
That is how Elon Musk has termed this bill. And I heard you ask the question, who's going to be watching this? The answer is I'm going to be watching Josh Hawley. Because if Josh Hawley joins with Rand Paul and a few other key senators, this thing will go down. And that would be a fundamentally disastrous moment for Donald Trump. And it should go down. It is an abomination.
Give me the issues that we have with it, John.
Well, all you have to do is take a look at the fact that it is a pork barrel bill. You have to understand that it passed by one vote in the House of Representatives.
What does a pork barrel bill mean, John?
It means there's a lot of stuff in there that has nothing to do with anything except paying people off. And that's what they're doing with members of Congress. Look, all you have to do is understand that what Donald Trump is pushing now would hurt people on Medicaid, would hurt people who are in need of assistance with FEMA. I mean, you go down the list and you watch the butchering that is taking place. This was not done carefully or with a considered forethought. And when you have the architect of all of this, I'm of course referring to Elon Musk, now calling this a disgusting abomination. What does that tell you? And so my feeling is that if Trump gets it through, the Republicans are going to be hung with this, and eventually it'll cost them future elections. There's just no excuse for it. No excuse at all.
Well, the last part of what you said intrigues me the most, because I'm wondering about the politics on the back end of this. So somehow, with the pressure of Donald Trump, the charisma of Donald Trump, the empty promises of Donald Trump, who knows? Come to Mar-a-Lago. We'll have a wild weekend together. It's great. We really appreciate it. America, make America great again. And he gets it through. Whatever he has to say, whatever he has to do, I'll take care of your district. I'll take care of your state. On the back end of that, what is the concern on the part of House members who voted for it and senators who may do similarly?
Building up the national deficit. I mean, the debt grows in the terms of trillions of dollars. This is no joke. And by the way, take somebody like Josh Hawley. I mean, really examine him. He represents a state where a tremendous number of citizens are on Medicaid.
That's in Missouri, right?
That's right. And if you cut aid to those in Missouri who count on Medicaid, they're going to blame Josh Hawley. And Josh Hawley, by the way, has national aspirations. He'd like to be president or vice president one day.
This is what I wanted to get to, though. So what you're saying is there are politically damaging aspects to supporting this bill, not to mention the fact, this is kind of what I was hinting at earlier, that Musk, having been vocal about the abomination that this bill is, might even drop a little of his magic money dust on some of those campaigns when they come up to vote, which is, again, there'll be midterms and then.
Yeah, but take a look at what's on the screen right now. $2 trillion is a lot of money. $2.5 trillion is more money. And that is what we are talking about adding to the national debt. I mean, this is the Republican Party, for God's sake. The party of, theoretically anyway, fiscal responsibility.
Well, that is complete hypothetical. It's complete theory, because in practice, what happens under Republican administrations, John Rothmann?
Well, unfortunately, the national deficit grows even more.
Yeah.
And we saw that for a variety of circumstances under George W. Bush.
You saw it under
And
Reagan. You saw it under Bush. You saw under every administration.
except Richard Nixon, who came in with the last president to have a balanced budget. I hasten to point that out.
Well, I know you worked for Nixon, but he left the building early. We don't know how it would have worked out, do we? But I do think that this is a completely bizarre, twisted notion that I suppose it's a credit to branding or a credit to PR or whatever, that Republicans have this sense of fiscal responsibility out there in the zeitgeist. Because the reality is, as I just said, every Republican administration has grown the deficit.
Yeah, and
Every
take a look at
single
what
one.
you said. You said a moment ago about Doge. Doge isn't a legal operation unless Congress makes it a legal operation, and only the Republicans would dream of doing that, and they're going to be held accountable for that too. I mean, this is the most absurd situation I've ever seen in the United States of America. We've never had anything like it. Oh, wait, doesn't Donald Trump say that all the time?
Yes, he does.
There's never been anything like this.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you. On cue. Boy, I'll tell you.
It is, I guess it's bizarre in some sense. I think what's happening with the lack of due process in this country may rival this for me, top priority. I mean, these are all things that are 5-alarm fires, probably you could say.
Can you imagine? Look, we just had another outbreak of Jew hatred, and it was a terrible thing. And the fellow who did it, who was here initially on a legal basis, then violated his term here. Now they've rounded up 5 members of his family.
You're talking, excuse me, I'm talking about the Molotov cocktail throwing guys.
Now they're rounding up his family. They're going to deport the family. If I were held responsible for everything my children did or that my parents did, well, I don't want to say anything bad about my parents, but you understand what I'm saying. This is absurd. This is not the United States of America. And in terms of the way our legal system should work, and it's shameful. And when you talk still about suspending habeas corpus, which is what the Trump administration is doing, including the Attorney General of the United States, you have to
explain what suspending habeas corpus means.
What it would mean is that your right to a speedy trial would be gone. Your right
to be in front of a judge at all would be gone.
That's right. And so I don't understand. Let me tell you, I was a Republican for many years. If any Democrat,
by the way, I always wanted to ask you this: what appealed to you about the Republican Party in the '70s that you would want to become a Republican?
No, in the '50s and '60s. I hate to say how old I am.
Well, you worked for the Nixon administration. That was late '60s into early '70s, wasn't it?
The answer to your question is the Southern Democrats so offended me. Their obstruction of anything dealing with civil rights, voting rights, and in the end, what happened is that all of those Southerners became Republicans, and the Republican Party essentially shifted its stance, the Southern strategy, as it was termed. Mm-hmm. And the Republican Party once had a liberal wing that was truly a liberal wing. And you had an alliance between liberal Republicans and liberal Democrats to make sure that social justice was clear. May I just, because we were originally.
Well, I would just say one thing, but because I know I love when you do these pivots, but I just want to keep you on this one topic, because I think you're seeing, John, right now, the very same change that you saw in the Republican Party back then. You're seeing it now in a far more alarming sense. So this isn't your daddy's Republican Party, even if your daddy was from the 90s. You know what I mean?
Agree with you.
Yeah.
I want to say a word too, because I live in San Francisco, and I knew Harvey Milk. Harvey Milk and I were friends. And the announcement yesterday by Pete Hegseth at the instruction of Donald Trump that they're taking Harvey's name off this Navy ship.
Yeah, Harvey served in the Navy. Harvey served
in the Navy. He was a Korean War vet. He exited the military because he was gay. He came here to San Francisco. He developed a great passion for human rights and civil rights. I worked with him on a variety of issues. And all I can tell you is the idea that not only Harvey Milk, who was a good, honorable, decent guy, and believe me, I can say that because I knew him quite well, but you're talking about Thurgood Marshall. They're talking about taking Thurgood Marshall's name off. They're talking about what they're doing at this moment is so abhorrent to everything I believe, everything I think, everything I feel. And there ought to be a giant outcry, and there is from some circles, but not enough. And clearly, Hegseth is following Trump's instructions, and it is just a shame that the United States Navy ship named for Harvey will now have a different name. And so all I can tell you is I find everything about the Trump administration and what it's doing to be objectionable. That's the simple truth. And I know I'm supposed to be relatively objective when I come on this show. And even on my show on
What?
KGO, I was notorious for being relatively objective. But I can't be objective about this. This is obscene.
Kim, did you
Kim,
have something for
you
the
wanna say
Honorable
something?
Rothman?
I do have a question for you, John Rothman, because you talk a lot about the switching of parties, and there was recently two high-profile party switchers. I think the man's name is Joe Walsh, who was a former
Yes.
Republican
He
congressman
was a
who just
Republican congressman who's become a
yeah,
Democrat.
he just flipped over to being a Democrat because he said he didn't want to be an a-hole and a jerk, right? And he realized that what he had been talking about when he was a Republican wasn't who he was, not who he wanted to be. And then today, Karine Jean-Pierre, the former White House spokesperson for Joe Biden, has decided to switch parties. She becomes a Democrat. What kind of I think a lot of people.
No. She becomes an
Oh,
independent.
she became an independent.
An
Rather.
independent.
She became
He
an
became an
independent. Yeah,
independent.
from a Democrat to an independent. I'm sorry, I misspoke. But I guess it begs the question. I think a lot of people find some type of identity, personal identity in a political party where it's more than just a political party, but like a way of life and who we are. And, this is what my daddy was, and this is what I am. This is who our family is. What kind of soul searching and how hard is it to go from losing that part of your identity to picking up a different party and becoming someone else?
Well, the identity that I had in the Republican Party was completely established. I'd served as president of the Teenage Republicans. I had served as a member of the Republican State Central Committee. I'm the biographer of Harold Stassen. My identification with the Republican Party was clear and complete. When I left the Republican Party, I gave an answer that Ronald Reagan once gave about why he left the Democratic Party. He said, "I didn't leave the party, they left me." And I think that's a very clear, precise way of saying that the Republican Party has failed. And the tragedy for the Republican Party is that when Donald Trump is gone, they are going to live with his legacy. And that's why this vote in the House and in the Senate is so important. It may be Trump's big bill, but the reality is the Republicans will have to embrace it and be responsible for it. And I think they will take the heat for it for years and years to come, and deservedly so.
Well, I would agree with the fact that there'll be a lot of heat because it is destructive, and the heat that you described, though, will be slow. It'll be a slow boil. Now, I think there'll be some immediate effects of even this this tariff that he's put on steel. I mean, there are
unbelievable.
There are a lot of industries that depend on this steel, and now you put a 50% tariff on steel. You're effectively cutting off all imported steel, and so construction will be affected. The car industry will be affected. I mean, literally, just look around you.
The cans that we buy things in our supermarkets will be gone. I mean,
so these are all things. But MAGA would say, John, to what you just said is, yeah, we are here, and there is going to be a MAGA effect, and we're going to continue after Donald Trump. And here's how they win it over, and this speaks to political parties and their identities. They win it over how? They won it over largely because of immigration and this trans/DEI/wokeism jihad they're on. And it is politically effective, even as we know that, to a person, many of these MAGA people probably wouldn't have a problem with, their gay hairdresser, their gay brother, the idea that gay is even a thing in America anymore is insane to me. But
you're right.
They're able to package it, these social issues,
but they won't be able to,
and that's one of the things that led them to prominence.
Pocketbook issues are going to overtake them. I have to say a word to you today about the rise in Jew hatred in the United States of America, because in the Jewish community today, there is a tremendous fear and I want to use that term advisedly, go to a local synagogue, go to a local Jewish community center. You will see security beefed up unbelievably because of not only what happened in Boulder, Colorado, which was an abomination, talk about an abomination, but what happened in Washington, D.C. There is not a Jew in the United States who is not concerned about safety. And if a major segment of this community in our United States of America has to be afraid because of who they are, well, as one of my African American friends said, now we all understand it's not just African Americans, it's Jews and others. And clearly, when you take a look now at what Donald Trump is doing in terms of his plans for foreign policy, it's astounding. We haven't even mentioned, I know we have such limited time, Mark, and I blame you for that. I want you to know.
Yeah.
But when you talk
God.
about what's happening in Ukraine right
I
now,
blame you.
Okay, maybe it's
if
my
you
fault.
talk
Go
about
ahead.
what's happening in Ukraine now, and you talk about what the Russians did, the Ukrainians did rather to the Russians, it's absolutely astounding. Not only the hitting of the airplanes, but also the blowing up of the bridge. I mean, you've got a major war going on. And by the way, at the same time, and we've talked about Iran before, it appears that the talks between Iran and the United States are not going well. And Donald Trump is essentially threatening to respond if he doesn't get his way. And
Well,
this is going,
you do this and you go, and what about this and what about that? I don't know. I could double back like 5 minutes ago and follow up, but I'll just give you. On the Iran thing. I'm gonna ask you to build that out a little bit because they're really close to having a reactor-ready plutonium, are they not?
They are, and everybody understands it. And by the way, that doesn't come from the United States or from Israel. It comes from the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency of the United Nations, which is hardly a neutral or objective group when it comes to some of these issues.
When you say that, what do you mean?
The United Nations has a bias
They
when it
lean
comes to
toward
Israel and the Middle East. There's no question about it. But I would suggest,
but how is that germane in the case of Iran and the plutonium enrichment?
because traditionally there would be an alliance which says that Iran has a right to protect itself. But the problem is the Saudis view Iran as a major threat. And I could mention, in the context of Ukraine, the largest nuclear facility in Europe is located in Ukraine. And there have been attempted assaults on that.
Well, it's been hit. It's been hit by fire.
That's right. So, but I'm talking about aerial assault. So we have, I mean, there is so much going on right now that should cause grave concern. And we have a president in the White House who, well, if he doesn't get his way, he just walks away. And that's what scares me.
You mentioned Iran. Let me ask you about the calculus of what's going on with the Israelis and Gaza.
Well, the Israelis will take it out if they don't, if there isn't a proper response.
No. But I'm not. By the way, that could have its own incredibly disastrous
You're absolutely right. But remember, if one low-grade nuclear weapon, a Hiroshima-type bomb, which is a low-grade nuclear weapon, hit Tel Aviv, there would be millions of people killed instantaneously, and it would be the end of Israel as a viable force.
How do you do the arithmetic on what's happening in Gaza now? It's a real, it's a horror show, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And one has to remember first that this happened because of Hamas and what they did to Israel and the attack on Israel, and their hostages still being held. In fact, the demonstration which took place in Boulder was a peaceful walk by mostly elderly people to call attention to the fact that hostages are still being held by Hamas. I think what's happening in Gaza is a disgrace. By the way, if the world wanted to solve the problem, it's very simple. Let the United Nations come into Gaza with relief, and let the United Nations administer it, and let there be observers from Israel, from Hamas, from whoever you want, to make sure that it's all legitimate. What we're seeing now is the people of Gaza being held hostage, and it's not Israel that's holding them hostage. It is the attitude of Hamas at this moment, and I think the Arab world understands that very clearly.
So you're saying that the NGOs that go in there with relief,
huge bias.
They're not. You're saying that they're not. There's not a neutrality. There's a militarized aspect to that, or what are you saying?
I think no. There is the understanding that many of these NGOs, non-governmental operations, are pro-Hamas, and that represents a serious problem. Look, when the Israelis are compelled to take out the Hamas leader, as happened again last week. Where was the Hamas leader hiding? Underneath the largest hospital in Gaza, in a bunker. And the Israelis said, we gave warning, and they did. They said, we're going to get you wherever you are. And Hamas doesn't care.
Wouldn't there be a solution related to, you mentioned the UN, some kind of UN peacekeeping force, some kind of neutral, at least I understand in quotes, the UN, don't think the Israelis see the UN as a neutral.
Absolutely. It's not a neutral body.
Yeah,
but I would be willing to trust if the blue helmets, as they were called,
right,
were called in with no weapons just to administer aid. And that would be something that would be very interesting. Look, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy created by Hamas. And I must say, one of the other tragedies in all of this is the Palestinian Authority, which is theoretically the legal representative of the Palestinian people, is completely impotent. And they are quaking in their boots that Hamas goes after them. So this is an unfolding tragedy. The Middle East, Ukraine, and I would point out quickly, not to shift gears once again, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, and Poland are all worried about Putin. And where is the restraint on Putin? Donald Trump has a conversation with him. It doesn't make any difference to Putin. He has a program. Oh, one other quick point. Are you aware that most of the National Security Council was laid off? That Trump dismissed them? Now, I've been involved in foreign policy for years, and I've very often relied on people in the National Security Council for information. You take those experts and you remove them. Who's running the show? Stephen Miller? For God's sake, did you hear what Stephen Miller said? I always tell you to pull it up, but you can hear it. It was on CNN. It was fascinating. The Democratic Party, he said, should rename itself the Communist Party. Did you hear me? On CNN, to millions of people, the Democratic Party should rename itself the Communist Party. And when you
it's funny that you're so angry about that. That didn't even move my meter. It's like, that's just like, it's ridiculous propaganda. It reminds me, like, this isn't 1958, dude. I don't know what
you're right.
This Communist Party thing. I mean, it's so absurd. You would use that. It's the only invective that he could marshal at that moment. It was just he should have just said they're a bunch of stupid idiots. You know what I mean? It was just a dumb thing to say.
He is making policy on questions of immigration.
I see what you're saying. You're saying, look, that's the guy who's making policy. Okay, that's
this is not a person without significant authority and power in Washington. Can you imagine that? And I'm going to watch on CNN, by the way. They're doing the thing on Sunday night or Saturday night rather, the special on Edward R. Murrow. I can hear it now. And you may recall that I got permission from Casey Murrow, Edward R. Murrow's son, and we did a 4-hour late night broadcast on KGO on Edward R. Murrow. I had permission to use all the sound.
Oh, that's really cool. I didn't know that. That's really great. Good for you.
It was amazing. And so
do you feel a little jealous of George Clooney, is what you're telling me, John Rothman, because he was able to actually mount a Broadway show and a presentation that's now on CNN, and you just got
you know what I'm really jealous of? The fact that we don't have any broadcasters who stand up the way Edward R. Murrow stood up in a clear, precise way.
Well, you have capitulation on the part of broadcasters, actually. Let me just, because you mentioned it, I never got your reaction to the Jake Tapper story that continues to pay dividends for the right on the fact that Biden was checked out a lot of the time, just wasn't, the mental acuity challenges that Joe Biden had were far more significant than were being reported at the time.
Have you read the book?
No, and I have no intention of reading it.
Okay. I read the book. I read it with great care. There is no question that Joe Biden was impaired. By the way, those of us who called for Joe Biden to withdraw from the race, which I did early on, as you will recall, on this broadcast as well, are not surprised. Joe Biden is no longer an issue. And you heard what the Republicans are talking about now? Further investigation of Joe Biden. Further investigation of the Biden crime family. Wait a minute. Who's concluding billion-dollar deals right now? The Trump children, for God's sake. The hypocrisy is so overwhelming, I can't even begin to describe it. But my answer to you about Joe Biden is, yes, it was the greatest cover-up since Woodrow Wilson. And many will recall that Wilson had a stroke in September of 1919 and remained in power until March 4th, 1921.
You read the book, so tell me, give me an example of how the cover-up went and how he just didn't know where he was and it was all right. Give me an example. Those of us who are not going to read the book, I have no intention of reading it, so tell me what the story was.
I think the bottom line is that, like anyone at his age, there is a loss of ability to function.
Sure, but don't give me the
And
bottom line. Give me
the
an
bottom line
example.
is his
You read the
wife-
book, you said. Go
his
ahead. Give me an
yes.
example.
His wife and his staff covered up in order to maintain Joe Biden's authority.
Okay.
And this is not new. Edith Bowling Galt Wilson covered up for her husband. The difference is we're living in the 21st century. But Jake Tapper did a great, good service, and the book is really, and his co-author, whose name escapes me at the moment, but this was a good, solid book.
Well, I have to say, John, I said the same thing you did. I believe I said it last week, which is, this idea somehow that you're covering for the infirmity of the chief executive is not a new thing. I mean, it goes back to FDR not wanting to be seen and, sort of the compromised position that polio had left him. You cited these other examples. I think Ronald Reagan wasn't all there all the time. I mean, I really think that, as you suggest, with age comes a diminishment of mental acuity a lot of the time. And I think with Donald Trump, he's not, he's on his own thing. Look,
no, of course,
look,
Donald Trump is diminished. Look at the mistakes he makes.
They can't even get him to read the presidential daily briefing. He doesn't look at it, and now they're looking at ways they can package it like a Fox News segment, because that's the only way they can get his attention. This is literally what Tulsi Gabbard is saying to staffers. Forget about packaging something that he reads. Forget about a one-page. Forget about using his name in a few paragraphs that fill him in. Let's actually produce a video, because that's the only way that this president may actually take a briefing.
And it won't.
That's
and that won't
scandalous.
be acceptable, because they'll say that video was edited. And by the way, with Biden, what did Fox do? And I won't call it Fox News. That's an oxymoron to me. Fox did the edited films about Biden in order to make him look even worse than he was. So my answer is the next election is going to produce younger candidates. That's for damn sure. But I want I've noticed
Biden aged better than most folks, says Surfing Tumbleweed. Yeah. But his speech impediment has been abused. I'm so sick of it. Yeah, I would say this about that, John, and I think you'd agree. In this media age, you do need someone who comes across well on television, a communicator. That was what Reagan was. Reagan was the great communicator, right? He was an actor. He was able to sell it. You need somebody who is top of ticket from that cloth, I think.
You know what I remember? In 1992, Reagan had not yet been officially diagnosed with Alzheimer's, but he was clearly slowing up. He was out of office. He delivered one of the most masterful performances before the Republican National Convention in 1992 because he was just what you said, an actor. He knew his lines. And this is going to be a real issue, I think, in the future about presidents, and it won't change because the job of a president's staff is to cover up for him. That's the job.
When appropriate. You'll love this comment that comes in from Penny. Mark, God damn it, stop talking over John Rothman.
Why are you yelling?
Wow. Stop talking over John Rothman. If I don't talk over John Rothman, I won't get a goddamn word in on this show. Are you kidding? I'm not talking enough over John Rothman. How dare you, Penny? Penny, how could you take me out like that? My God. It's crazy. You
cannot say you love your country.
Unreal.
Wait, I know we're ending because I know you're running out of time, but
yes,
I just want to remind everybody that term of the Supreme Court ends shortly, this June, coming up. And there will be major decisions being rendered dealing with Donald Trump, dealing with Doge, dealing with a whole bunch of stuff. And I, for one, am waiting, and I've said it before, but I want to reinforce it. I'm watching Amy Coney Barrett, who is now under vigorous attack from the Trump administration, and I'm watching Chief Justice John Roberts as the two potential swing votes. I know already what Alito and Thomas are going to do. I know what the liberals on the court are going to do. But it is the question of these swing votes. And did you hear the statement that Donald Trump is upset with the Supreme Court people that he put on because they're not doing what he wants? And I would remind Donald Trump something he seems to have forgotten, and that is that the Supreme Court and our judiciary are independent branches of government. That's what check and balance is all about. But remember, Trump embraces a concept called the unitary presidency, which means he doesn't want any opposition from anywhere, anytime, anyway. And by the way, you alluded to the fact that the person who was going to be put in charge of NASA, who was a friend of Elon Musk's, his nomination is now being withdrawn. And you didn't want to draw the conclusion, but I'll draw the conclusion. Donald Trump is a vindictive person, and he will do now everything he can without directly confronting Elon Musk, because Musk is maybe even too powerful in terms of a sense. And I think this is an example of that vindictiveness.
I love talking to you, and I enjoy even more talking over you. Yes, I have to shoehorn my comments in between Rothman because he'll just keep going. But somebody somebody says this. We hear, I can't post this because I'll be, they'll downgrade me, but I've got a yellow card, somebody, related to Rothman. Albert, can I put the F word up there, or what happens if I put the F word up there? What are they going to do?
Let's not do that.
You know, whenever anybody says...
You can? All right, I'm going to do it.
Whenever anybody says the F word, I say there's another 4-letter word that begins with F. It's fork. And so I always substitute fork for the other.
Well, then James W. says, we hear you enough, Mark.
What?
Give John his time. You'll be doing 3 hours on KFI, so be forking nice to John, please.
Hey, which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
Who are these people? This is absolutely outrageous.
These are obviously very discriminating, very knowledgeable.
Listen to me. I don't want to hear you.
It is just an absolute affront when these, my beloved listeners, take me on just because I have to, again, I've got to parachute into your ongoing diatribe that goes on for 40 minutes.
A disgusting abomination.
Disgusting abomination. Find John Rothman on his podcast. It's a daily podcast that brings order to your life. Around the Political World with John Rothman. What's so funny to me is that people give me a hard time about giving you a hard time, when if I couldn't give you a hard time, it would just diminish my enjoyment of this segment. Part of the fun of it for me is that we get to roll around in the dirt together. The Voice of San Francisco is the other place that you can find John, thevoicesf.org. The Voice
under podcasts,
.org. Under podcast, you'll find the wonderful John Rothman, our brother.
And thank you, Mark. Mark, before you go,
yes, sir.
I want to urge everybody to support the Mark Thompson program. It ought to be listened to and heard by people, whether we agree or disagree. Mark and the team, and I include Kim McAllister in that, really do a great public service, and I want to thank you publicly and give you my full support. My pleasure.
Well, I really do appreciate that. And James W., who actually used the F word to try to tell me to stay out of your conversation and just let you run. He, of all people, should support this show because I didn't red card him. I let him use the F word. And so, James, I'm looking for a super sticker from you today. Damn it. All right. John, we love you. See you next week.
Good. See you
John
next
Rothman,
week.
everybody. Bravo.
Hi, it's
bravo.
Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.